Max, are you staying?
I got my
Everybody look at him in disappointment.
Use this one, I think.
Shame. Yeah, for those of you who don't train with us, but you're Sports Zone, I'm Rick. This is Joe. We run the strength and conditioning here. Thank you for coming by. And obviously, if you guys got any questions at all, we're always a resource for the Sports Zone athletes. You know, whether you are training with us or not training with us. Okay. But the primary reason why we wanted to hold this seminar is something that we wanted to start doing a lot more in addressing the nutrition aspect of training. Because how I would really like to say it is, you might have an hour with us, but for the rest of the day, you got 23 hours to mess it all up. And how you treat your nutrition can either make or break the results that you see in the gym, but also your performance on the field. And too many athletes are good despite their training, not because of despite their nutrition, not because of their nutrition, if that makes sense. So we really want to try to start educating our athletes as much as possible on just best practices. And you know, it's not easy, but some small changes day by day can really make a huge difference. So we don't have a PowerPoint projector, but I printed it all out for you guys. So real quick, if you don't have a pen, I would definitely get a pen real quick. We can help you. There should be some on the desk. Just to make quick notes, also if you have questions for us too, because in the middle of the seminar, if you got a question, you can raise your hand, or at the end of the seminar, if you guys have a question for us, you can come up to us and ask us. We're going to hang around for probably about like 30 minutes to 40 minutes. Is there anybody who needs a pen that doesn't have one? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Yeah, and as we go, I'll like guide you guys on what slide we're on or talking about. But so that's like the intro. So what are we going to go over today? The seminar is not just going to be about nutrition. In reality, it's more about recovery. So we're trying to optimize how you guys can recover from workouts and for practices and games. Especially, you know, Sports Zone girls, like you guys are traveling all summer long. It's very demanding, and if your nutrition and recovery isn't on point, really burnout and injury is bound to happen. Okay, so we're talking about nutrition, we're talking about sleep, we're talking about hydration, and we're talking about stress management. So when we talk about stress management, it's not just, you know, stress of school, but it's more of like a holistic approach. Like when you train, that's stress. When you have practice, that's stress. When you have a game, that's stress. When you break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, that's stress. The body's going to recognize that the same, and if you can't manage that appropriately, and you have too much stress, then it's going to overspill, and recovery is going to suffer. Okay, so one note that I made in here too is that, you know, kids are busier now more than ever. You know, Joe and I talk about this all the time, especially during the summer. You know, you guys are playing a travel ball sport, and sometimes you guys are gone for 2-3 weeks at a time, and you come back and you guys are beat up, you're tired, you're fatigued, you're burned out, and it's almost inevitable for a lot of these athletes by the time they get older to be dealing with some sort of injury or something that's overuse based. So the more we optimize our ability to recover, it's going to help with trying to avoid those overuse type injuries, because those can really be, if I'm being honest, a career ender. That they can really get in the way of getting that college scholarship that you want, or even playing too much and not recovering, that burnout starts to happen, and you don't necessarily like the sport that you play anymore. So we're trying to balance that as much as possible, right? And that's really where that stress management comes into play. So without good nutrition, without good recovery, results in the gym will always suffer. Okay, if you don't have that, then you're not going to see the results that you want. Sometimes you might not see any results if it's that bad, okay? So that's the goal of the seminar and what we want to talk about. And hopefully you guys can take away some things that are going to be really valuable, all right? So just to flip over to, what's the goal of nutrition? In my eyes, when we're talking about nutrition for an athlete, we're trying to maximize your performance. So we want you to be in an optimal state when you go to play, train, etc. All right. So just a couple of notes I left here. Without good nutritional habits, you'll never be at your best. All right. Dehydrated, you're not going to perform well. If you're low in protein, low in calories, performance will suffer. And we see it often where somebody comes in and maybe they haven't eaten in like 5 hours, and the normal athlete that we would see from them, performance-wise, is significantly less. Their performance drops off significantly. And I would make an argument that almost makes the training session not even worth it, because we're no longer performing well, and we're no longer going to get the adaptation that we want from training. And you can say the same exact thing for practices and games. If you're not at your best and you go practice, you're not practicing at your best. You're not going to be your best. Does that make sense? So, if you're not at your best, you're going to have suboptimal performance in the gym. And what that's going to result in is suboptimal results. So, the more often we can be at our best, or as close to our best as we can, the more we're going to get out of our training sessions, and the more we're going to get out of our practicing games. All right? So maximum performance equals maximum results. So the better you are in that moment, the more you'll get out of it. So that's where efficiency comes in. I'd rather you get less total training sessions or less total practices, but you're at your best every time, than more and maybe being at 50%. That makes sense, everyone? And if anyone has any questions, again, raise your hand and just let me know. Okay? So, flipping over, the first thing we're really going to go over are the 3 primary macronutrients. All right? So, who here knows what a macronutrient is? So it's essentially like all foods is either going to be made out of, it's either going to have protein, carbs, or fats. Okay, so everything you eat, you can look at it and say it's probably made out of protein, carbs, or fats. There's another macronutrient that we don't really need to talk about. That's alcohol. You guys don't have to worry about that. Please don't be ingesting that. That's not going to help. But the more you can understand what each of these macronutrients can do, the more you can start making conscious choices on what to eat and how it's going to affect your performance. Okay, so the first one, and we can make an argument that this is probably the first one we address immediately, is protein. No worries. So, with protein, if you're consistently low on this, and a lot of athletes do tend to be pretty low with protein intake, it can almost guarantee that you're not going to build lean muscle mass and you're not going to recover well. So if this is low, and even if you don't ingest it on a regular basis, then you're very much selling yourself short. All right, so if you look at your muscles and connective tissue, that's primarily made out of protein. And when you train and when you practice, that's going to get broken down. And the only way that we build that back up is through protein that we've already eaten. It's digested, it's in our bloodstream. It's going to go to that area and help rebuild that structure and hopefully rebuild it back stronger. Okay, so if you're consistently low in protein, then as that muscle starts to break down, you're not going to have the available resources to build it back up. Okay, so that's why you guys may have heard this before, but after you work out, you should have a protein shake, right? Have you guys heard that before? Like that window of time where protein synthesis is higher. Like there's a lot of truth to that. If after you train, you want to try to get protein into your system as fast as possible to help that recovery process, okay? So one way I like to describe it is being low in protein is just about the same as, you know, trying to build a house, but the workers show up and there's no supply. You got nothing to build with. So if you don't have anything to build with, you can't recover. You can't rebuild. Yes?
What's the time that it's more effective? Like how long after you finish working out?
Usually about 30 minutes to an hour. But we'll cover that in more detail. I got a couple more slides in there. Yeah. So if you are working out and like your next meal is 3 hours from now, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's also not the best thing in the world. Okay.
One thing to add around that too is super important, and the behaviors, like the best people who are in the gym are super focused on their nutrition afterwards also. That can change a little bit too though, depending on like your pre-workout, or if you take any like your pre-workout meal or your intra-workout meal also. So super important, but if you have a huge meal right like a little bit before you work out, it might be, maybe you just need like a snack or something. So there's some leeway with that too, and we can also keep talking about that, just to go hit that point really quick.
Yeah, if you think about it, if you eat a good amount beforehand and it's being digested while you're working out, it's the materials are in your bloodstream. So the purpose of it is having those amino acids, which are proteins that are broken down, available to help rebuild the tissue. So one thing we talk about is how much total protein are you having around your workouts, that is before, during, and after. So now I'm just going over to the protein slide. If you guys want to take a look at that, the first one that says protein. This is also really important to know, because protein does not get stored similar to fats and carbs. Fats, adipose tissue, that can be stored there. Carbohydrates get broken down and can be stored into your muscle and your liver. We're going to go over that in a lot more detail later. But proteins do not necessarily get stored. They're either going to get excreted or they're going to get converted into something else to be stored. So it's not going to be quite as useful in that period of time, like while we're training, if you don't have that available, right? So you really want to try to avoid having most of your protein in just 1 or 2 meals in the day. Which you could do that. You could have a meal that has 100 grams of protein in it, but you're not going to get quite the same out of that versus trying to spread it out through multiple meals throughout the day. All right, so generally, the body's only really going to absorb 20 to 50 grams of protein at one time, and it changes dependent on the person. Really, the smaller you are, the less protein you're going to be absorbing. So a good guideline would be spreading that 20 to 50 grams throughout the course of the day in 5 medium to small meals. All right, so, and we'll go into that in even more detail with how much before, after, and during the workouts too. All right, so you're only going to absorb about 20 to 50 grams of protein at one time. So every single meal that you have, you should be able to identify where the protein is coming from. All right, so if you can't look at what you're eating and point and say that's where the protein is, then you're probably not either having a significant source of protein, or at least a good high quality source of protein. And in a couple slides we'll go over that too. All right, so the moral of the story is eat frequently and make sure you know where your protein's coming from on each meal that you eat. All right, so when you have breakfast in the morning, you got your 3 eggs and some toast. Where's the protein? The eggs, right? So if you have a snack between breakfast and lunch, maybe you got something like gummy bears. Where's the protein? There's none, or nothing significant. All right, so that's where you can start to decide your snacks between meals. What snacks are effective? What snacks are good for me that I can start to stack up this protein over the course of the day, so I have these resources available to me. All right, so eat frequently and make sure you can identify every source of protein. Okay, which leads me to the next one is there's two types of protein. So whenever you're ingesting two proteins, there's going to be two primary forms of it. One's complete protein and one's incomplete protein. All right, so we have amino acids that make up protein. Complete proteins will always contain what we call the 9 essential amino acids. And all you got to know about that is these essential amino acids we cannot make ourselves. Okay, so the body can't convert it, make it, or create it. Okay, you have to ingest it. An incomplete protein is something that is missing at least one essential amino acid. Okay, so the primary difference there is this: the incomplete proteins, the absorption is not going to be as good. You're not going to be able to use it as effectively to rebuild connective tissue and muscle mass. But it's not to say that you should not eat incomplete proteins. Okay, so complete proteins are primarily going to be your animal-based proteins. So I have a list right there if you guys can see it, like milk, beef, eggs, fish, chicken, and any other animal products. Something that's going to come from an animal, it's primarily going to be meat. Okay, so eating some good source of meat and dairy can be a good source of complete protein. If we're talking, kids who are in school as well, a good high quality, high protein yogurt or even cottage cheese, it's a really good avenue to go towards, because if you bring in a chicken thigh to school, it's going to go bad by lunch. So that kind of stinks, right? Like it's not, you can't necessarily refrigerate it. So you've got to kind of figure out ways to work around that. Incomplete proteins, that's going to be more like your animal-based stuff. Not your animal-based stuff, your plant-based stuff. And that's your nuts, quinoa, wheat, rice, beans. These all got protein in them. Like even peanut butter is actually a pretty good one. That would be like an incomplete source, but it is high in protein. I just would not rely on that for all of your protein intake. But in fact, it's a good way to add on to your meal. You got some chicken, add some rice on there. That's a good way to get a little bit extra protein. It might be incomplete, but you're pairing it up with a complete protein, so you're going to get the benefits. You're going to reap the rewards of having all 9 essential amino acids. Okay, so that's a good way to make a distinction between the two. And like we were saying earlier, identify each protein in your meal. Okay, and you can always also look it up how many grams per protein in each meal too. We'll go into that more, but that's good to know how many grams you're having each day. All right, so which leads me to this: what's our protein recommendation? So if you're an athlete and you want, especially if you're playing baseball and softball, you guys have to be strong. You have to be explosive. You got to be able to generate a lot of power and force. You got to have some muscle on you. All right. So if you want to recover well and you want to gain good lean muscle mass and lean tissue, we generally recommend 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you want to try to get 150 grams of protein per day. All right. And that's, like we were saying earlier, spread it out over the course of 5 medium to small meals. Okay. And so the next one here, we were just touching base on it with the intro workout and before and after workout. Generally, you take your total. All right. If you're to make math easy, let's say you weigh 100 pounds, so you want 100 grams of protein. All right. You want to try to have 30 to 40% of your total protein intake before, during, and after your workout. So over that time period of 1 to 2 hours before your workout and 1 to 2 hours after your workout, you want a total of 30 to 40% of all the protein you should be eating on the day. So if you weigh 100 pounds, over spread out through before and after and during, that's 30 to 40 grams of protein total before, during, and after, revolved around your workout. Okay. Some really easy ways to sneak protein in. Kind of alluded to it earlier. Protein shake every day. All right. This would be if you are training, if you're working out, if you have a practice, have your protein shake right after you're done. As soon as you're done, just have it ready to go. We personally, we'll go over the supplements that we do recommend for high school athletes. We personally recommend Optimum Nutrition brand whey protein, or another high quality brand is called like Endorphin. That's actually really good with getting the carbohydrates you need with that too. All right, so protein shake every day is just an easy way to sneak in 20 to 50 grams in your day. If you are having a hard time getting all the protein in, as a high school athlete, you're busy. It's going to be hard to meal prep, so this is just a super simple way to get that in. All right. Another one, if you are really trying to hit the protein intake goals, drink a glass of whole milk before bed. Just take a nice 16-ounce glass of whole milk and just drink it right before you go to bed. That's going to sneak in 10 to 15 grams easily, and that's through liquid. Just like with the protein shake, it's going to be much easier to get that. All right, so and that's like the dairy that we were talking about earlier. It's just an easy way to get some protein in. You don't like storage-wise, it's a little bit easier, and preparation-wise, it's a little bit easier than necessarily cooking like some meat. You have a question?
Should the amounts, like the 16-ounce glass, for example, should that be modified a little bit for younger athletes?
Yeah. So if you're smaller, like maybe have like an 8 ounce.
I'm at 7, so.
Yeah, you got like an 8 ounce one instead of 16. It usually it goes back to the protein recommendation of 1 gram per pound. Right. So if you're a little bit lighter and younger, you don't necessarily have to have as much before bed. That's also if you can't fit it in your stomach too. That's not good. All right. But yeah, 8 ounces. You can start with 4 ounces too. Like 4 ounces, you might sneak in maybe an extra like 5 grams of protein. Like that's valuable for you. And another good one is I really like Siggy's yogurt and Good Culture cottage cheese. Both of those, it's a little cup like this. It's got 15 to 20 grams in it. It's an easy way to just sneak that in between classes or right after school. That's another one. As soon as you're done with school, get something in your stomach. It doesn't have to be a big meal, but like the Siggy's yogurt or like the Good Culture cottage cheese. Most high school athletes hate cottage cheese, but this one tends to be, it tastes a little bit better. They actually have it mixed with fruit too. So if you're, especially if you're practicing or training after school, this is a really good way to just sneak in a little bit of protein and a little bit of carbohydrates right before you work out, and kind of fitting that in the window that we're talking about of your total protein intake before and after training. Okay. And then a really easy one too, peanut butter jelly sandwich. These are just quick and easy ways. If you utilize these, you could potentially sneak in, anywhere between 30 and 80 grams of protein in your diet easily, without necessarily feeling a lot more full or feeling like you have to shove food down your throat just to get all your protein in. Okay, so that's the general protein recommendations. We're gonna move over to why do we need carbs and fats, and Joe's gonna take over for that.
Just quick before we go on to that section, does anyone have any protein questions, things that they were thinking about, as we kind of wrap up that topic? Obviously we can come back to it if something pops in your head, but before we move on. Cool. Okay, so yeah, quick, what's up?
So when you're looking at protein powders, is there a way to tell just from what might be on the nutrition label between a good one and a bad one? How do you tell if you're in the store?
Yeah, I'll take that. Generally, we like to just use brands that we've used in the past, that we know are effective and we know work well. That's why we say, Optimum Nutrition. They've been around forever. They're a big company. Big companies for supplements, they need to have higher quality, because they got a bullseye on their back. They have too much to lose. So the bigger companies are actually going to produce higher quality brands. And frankly, with supplements too, the more expensive ones are going to be better. So that's why we like Optimum Nutrition, because the price point's pretty decent, and we've been using it for years, and it's high quality. But generally, like whey protein is a really good source. I don't go to Walmart and buy some cheapo brand. Like you're gonna get real gassy and feel bloated. So we generally recommend that Optimum Nutrition brand. There's a really high quality one called Endorphin. They're a little more expensive, but that's a very high quality one. There's definitely good ones out there too, but those are kind of like the two brands that we've used time and time again that we trust and we know work. There's definitely a vetting process that happens to find out the good high quality brand. But that's anyone with a good reputation. That's what you want to look for, and more expensive ones are generally going to be better.
Kind of piggyback off that too, like there's a couple things that are unfortunate about the supplement industry, but so the FDA regulations when it comes to supplements are not the same as when it comes to actual food you might buy in the grocery store or drugs you might get from a pharmacy, right? They're not nearly as tightly regulated. So you might find some, weird supplement companies that might slip something in that's not super great. So that's one of the reasons why we go with the brands that we know. There's another thing that helps too, is it's common for supplement companies to get a third party to verify that what's in their ingredients list is actually in their ingredients. So like NSF is one company that like all they do is they test supplements and they make sure that what the supplement company says is on their product is actually in their product. And you can go to the NSF website and they have all of the companies or all of the products that they have that are certified by them listed on their website. So if you ever run across a random like protein powder or something, you're like, is this worth it? Is this good? You can check. That's a really good website to check. So I'm pretty sure it's just nsf.com, whatever it stands for. And it'll either be on there or not. If it's not on there and we haven't tried it, we don't know anything about it, then we're not going to recommend it. Then I also suggest same thing for you guys. If you find like this random protein powder and you're like, I didn't see this on the website, I asked Rick and Joe, they don't know anything about it, I'd probably recommend don't buy it, let's go with a different one, if that helps. Cool.
There's so many supplement companies are coming and going. So
You can start a supplement company in your kitchen, so it's.
and those small ones have a lot less to lose.
Yeah.
So they can sneak things in there that may increase their profit margins, because if they go out of business, whatever, they're trying to make a quick buck anyway. So the well-known brands are always going to be better because they have more to lose.
Now, was that your question, or were you talking about like a good protein versus bad protein? Like we talked about completer and completer. Are you good?
I'm good.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so now we'll start moving on to carbs and fats. Okay, we kind of have these bundled together because they serve very similar purposes when it comes to athletic performance. There's a little bit of a difference that we're gonna go into a little bit, but nothing super crazy there, okay? So without looking, any idea what we actually use carbs and energy or carbs and fats for? Kind of just said it on accident. Yeah, way to go, cool. Yeah, so fats and carbs are both made out of different sizes of carbon, okay? Not that that's super important to remember. The purpose being is that fats and carbs are made out of the same things, okay? That's why our body can use it for both for energy, okay? So fats are just really long chains of carbon, and carbs or sugars are shorter chains, okay? Because of that, we don't actually store fat in our muscle like we do carbohydrates. So it takes a little bit longer for us to take fat that's circulating either in our bloodstream or fat that's in our fat tissue. We have to break that down, we have to put it into the bloodstream, it eventually has to get to the muscle. Because of that, it's used primarily for lower intensity activity. So you actually guys are burning primarily fat just sitting here existing, okay? Because you have plenty of time. It's not like you guys have very high energy demands right now when you're just sitting here, okay? And actually, like, the activity that you burn the highest percentage of fat is actually sleeping, because that's when you're at your lowest activity level. Okay? So far, so good? Because, yes,
Isn't there different like types of carbs? Isn't there ones that are longer lasting? And
yes, and we are gonna get to that in the carb section, but 100%, okay? For now, before we get there, carbs are stored in the muscle, in the blood, or in the liver, okay? Liver's kind of like your backup system, but because they're stored in the muscle, we can break them down way easier and more effectively for energy, for high intensity things. And by intensity, I mean things that you're breathing super hard for, right? So lacrosse game or basketball, volleyball, things where you're constantly going, okay, and you don't get a lot of break. You don't have enough time to actually break down your fats and get it to the muscle. You have carbs there right in the muscle, ready to go. Okay? That makes sense? So again, I kind of highlight that we don't have, one is not good or bad. They are used in different situations, and we want to be able to use both in the situations that they're actually designed to be used for. Okay? A great analogy, kind of tying this all together with fat, carbs, and proteins, is that if you were building a fire, fats are kind of like your wood that you're going to burn. Carbs are like, if you're going to use a newspaper or something, you get that lit really quickly, and then protein is like trying to start a fire with metal. You can burn protein for energy, but it's highly ineffective, and it's inefficient, so it's really tough to do, okay? We want protein there for our structure, okay? Not necessarily there for energy. That's what we have fat and carbs for. So the wood, the fats, is going to burn for a way longer time, but it's tougher to get it started. Whereas the carbs, that's the newspaper, it's way easier to get that started, but it's going to burn out a lot quicker than the wood is. Cool? Any questions before we keep rolling? Any other questions? That's it. Cool. So I'm kind of just going to touch on fats quickly, because again, it's you can argue whether carbs or fats are more important for your sport. Generally, carbs, since a lot of you guys deal with high intensity sports, you're going to be working really hard on your sport. We're going to spend a little bit more time on carbs because that's a little bit more important for us. That's going to be the fuel that you guys are burning a lot of, okay? But your fats, you're going to use them for energy like we just went over. They're going to be the base of a lot of hormones that you guys make just for your general health. They make up every cell in your body. If you guys just think about the outside of every cell, that's primarily fats. Your brain is primarily made up of fat, and it's going to help you, fats are going to help you absorb vitamins. Has anybody ever heard of fat-soluble vitamins? Okay? They're A, D, E, and K. Okay? If you don't take those in with fats, you're actually not going to absorb them effectively too. Okay? That's why they are fat-soluble vitamins. So, again, fats might kind of get demonized. If you go and you guys start doing your own research on nutrition, you start reading your own stuff, just know there's a purpose for everything. And if we don't have enough fat in our diet, some of these things are going to suffer, like our hormones, our brain structure, and the amount of these vitamins that we can absorb. Cool? Now, with that being said, fats have a way higher calorie density per gram than either protein or carbs do. As you can see, fats are 9 calories per gram, whereas protein and carbs are 4 calories per gram, okay? So, where people do get into some trouble with fat is that they might start to equate the size on their plate between the macronutrients. So oh, I have a chicken breast here, and I have the same amount of I don't know, walnuts, and I want to eat those, avocado or something that's on my plate. But the thing is, even if they're the same size on my plate, the nuts or avocado or whatever is going to be over twice the amount of calories that's on my plate there, okay? So that is one of the problems that a lot of people can run into as fat, is that could be a good thing if you're trying to put on a lot of size, put on a lot of muscle. It's way easy to get a lot of calories in, get a lot of energy. With that being said, it's a little bit easier to overeat on them because it's way easier to get a lot of calories in, and so on and so forth. Cool? So, foods that have a lot of fat in them. There's both animal products and plant products, as you see there. Some animal products are whole milk, high fat, beef or steaks. So you can get different cuts of steaks that are low fats. Those are lean, right? You can get like 93-7 ground beef or like 80-20, 90-10. Those are all a different ratio of protein to fats there. So if you get leaner steak or leaner ground beef, higher protein, less fats, and vice versa. Okay, bacon we know has got a lot of fat in it, like butter, cheese, eggs, fatty fish again, and then full fat yogurt. Okay, then some plant products, avocados, different nuts, olive oil, chia seeds, and then dark chocolates. Okay, so these are all different spots that we can get a lot of fat in. Again, that being good or bad depending on our goals of our diet. Okay. Right now, we kind of have a general recommendation of that being like 25 to 35% of your total daily calories. And then, but that is going to adjust with goal, as I've been emphasizing leading up to this point, okay? If we're not going in the right direction, again, fats are pretty easy to adjust, right? Because they're real easy to either, hey, have a handful of, again, if you need nuts, have a handful of nuts, like, as with your snack after school, right? That could be an extra like 500 calories and you don't even know it, right? So we can go from there. Any questions on fats before we move into carbs? Again, just kind of a general overview. Main point of this being that hopefully you guys don't walk away think fats being bad. Fats are not necessarily equated to being bad, okay? Cool. Awesome. So we're gonna move on to carbohydrates again because it's very important for high intensity activities, very important for building muscle, also important for repairing tissue, repairing muscle after workout, after game, after practice, okay? So these are primarily used for energy. There's not a lot of other things that we do with carbohydrates other than burn them for energy, okay? It's especially important for your brain and nervous system because they really, really like, as we, if you ever heard of glucose, that's what blood sugar is. That's kind of the simplest form of sugar that we use. They love burning sugar there. They love burning carbs, okay? So that's super important. Like, again, in a game, you have a long time. If you're starting to like crash mentally by the end of a game or something too, that could also be a reflection that your blood sugar is dipping. Right, so that's where we start getting in, maybe into like an intra workout or recovery in between games. Maybe if you're playing a tournament, if you are dead by game 3 of the day, we might start trying to bump up your carbohydrates because that's going to help you stay mentally focused and mentally sharp throughout the day also. Okay, so like I said before, these are 4 calories per gram. These are, to your question, Max, they're divided into simple sugars, simple and complex carbs. The simple is going to be kind of what we think about as sugar, and then complex carbs are going to be like starches or fibers. Okay, even though fibers a little bit rough, it could be sugar too. But any questions so far?
And I will say too, like when I was talking about earlier, when a kid hasn't eaten in 5-6 hours and they come in here, they're pretty lethargic. The primary reason is their blood sugar is lower. You've been sitting down in class all day, not necessarily eating, and you come straight to the gym, your blood sugar is going to be low. And that's why we really try to promote after school, eat some food.
Then, if you're already kind of starting the workout or starting your practice lower, kind of to Rick's point originally, like you're not going to be able to perform as effectively as you could throughout that whole workout or practice, right? Say you're trying to we really need to put on strength, so we're trying to get strong. Say you're trying to get faster, right? All of these things that are super important for sport, but you can't lift as heavy as you could throughout that day, or you can't run as fast as you could throughout that day because you're starting behind the 8 ball. That's going to be, it's kind of rough to say it's a wasted training session, but it's bordering on a wasted training session.
If you get enough of those in a row.
Then, yeah, you're moving in the wrong direction.
And what Joe's about to go over with the simple and the complex carbs is like really pay attention to this because it's really going to help you as far as timing goes of when and what carbohydrates you should be eating around your workouts, practices, and games.
Cool. So rolling into that, first thing we'd go over is again simple carbohydrates. Okay, So these are simple sugars that are easier to digest, and because of that, they're very effectively used right around the workout, either pre or intra or post, okay? Because of this, it's not like fibers, starches, they're gonna sit in our stomach for a really long time, and they're great if we have a long time before our next practice or before our next event. But if we, again, pre-workout, or if you've got to go maybe from us working out here, and then you've got to practice right after this, to replenish that fuel, the complex carbs are gonna take too long for you to digest, okay? Simple carbs are gonna go get through your system faster, literally like getting in and out of the stomach and out of the small intestine faster into your bloodstream. That's gonna let you use that quicker than things that have a lot of fiber or something in it. Cool? So, pre-workout. Pre-workout snacks, they consist of a couple grams of carb. Yes?
What are examples of simple carbs?
So I'm gonna go over that in a second. So pre-workout snack that consists of a couple grams of carbs to increase energy to train or work out harder. Post-workout, we're gonna start to kickstart our recovery process, right? Rick was talking about protein a lot for the recovery process because we need to use that and break that down to actually rebuild the structures. Carbs also help that process along, okay? More important, like I said before, if you need to train or play again very quickly, they help maximize muscle growth if that's a goal of you in your training program. And they are also very important for rehydration. So when you break down those simple sugars, they go through your bloodstream, then you store them in the muscle. When they go into the muscle, they actually pull water along with it too, which I'm gonna get into a little bit more in the hydration section, but these simple carbs do a lot, okay? So, some simple sugar examples. Anything that does have added sugar, so that means like your favorite snack, like your Pop-Tarts, your Oreos, all of those are examples of simple sugars, okay? Again, people might be like, this is good or this is bad. If you're using that, like having a snack quick right before your workout, it might not be the worst thing to have a snack like that. It might be, okay? It's gonna be depending on how you kind of handle that snack and how you feel. Plus, we can kind of modify that to what we add with it, okay? But so just as, so you know, simple sugars, anything that is processed that has added sugar. Fruits are a much healthier version of simple sugars because they do have a little bit of fiber, so that'll slow that down a little bit. Hydration drinks, I say hydration drinks in air quotes because again, as we'll see in the hydration section, not a lot of them are actually effective at hydrating you, but like Gatorade, that has a lot of sugar in it, okay? Maple syrup and then like white rice, okay? One of the things that's different between white rice and brown rice is that white rice has had all the fiber and stuff taken out of it, okay? So that makes it very easy to digest, and again, it's actually a preferred carbohydrate source if people are trying to put on a lot of muscle or trying to gain weight. Because it's so easy to digest, it's not gonna cause any like digestive issues, like brown rice might, because it still has the fiber and stuff added into it, okay? So even like foods, like depending on how they're processed and depending on how they're cooked, could kind of change whether it's simple or complex. Okay, is that okay for examples for you? Awesome. Any questions on foods like that? Okay, again, we'll kind of get into some recommendations and stuff in a little bit, but does anybody kind of get what a simple carb is? That's what we think about when we think of sugars. Okay. So, complex carbs, again, the inverse of that. These are gonna take a little bit longer to digest. They will work fine, and they will still do the same things that the simple sugars will do if we have a longer time between our workouts or between the times when we need to perform, right? So say you have a game on Monday or you have a workout here on Monday, but you're not gonna do any, you don't have anything else you need to be ready for until Wednesday or Thursday. It's not super important like that you get a really quick digesting carbohydrate in after the workout, okay? You're going to have enough time to replenish all the carbs that are stored in your muscles, in your liver, before you get to your next event. So a complex carbs there will work totally fine, okay? Now because of that, those are a little bit better for like long-term health. So again, if you're not burning, like actually using these carbohydrates for your workout, having a diet, if you're more of a, you know, you just are kind of sitting there, having a diet that has a lot of sugars in it, it's going to lead our blood sugars to be going up and down like this, okay? So that we're going to feel really good, we're going to crash. We're going to feel really good, we're going to crash. So these complex carbs have a little bit more consistent energy for a longer period of time too. Because of the slower digestion rate, we're going to feel a little bit better for the long term, okay? So some examples are vegetables, potatoes, and that was it, brown rice, beans, kind of fun fact, liver, that's actually one of the only animal products that you can get carbohydrates from, because that's where us as animals, that's where we store our excess carbs. So if you're gonna eat the liver of an animal, that's one of the only places you can get actual like appreciable carbs from. Anything that grows in the ground or like oats, okay? These take a little bit longer to digest. Again, very important for health. They're gonna, it's like you saw, there's vegetables on there. There's a lot of micronutrients that, like vitamins and minerals, that are in there for important for long-term health. Still gonna do the same thing if we're not like, if it's not super imperative that we replenish our carbs very quickly. Okay. Any questions on carb differences? Anything there? Cool. Okay, so ending here with some carb recommendations. So we're gonna say on average 5 grams, and I'm gonna mess you guys up a little bit, per kilogram of body weight. So does anybody know how to find their body weight in kilograms? No, that's okay. Thomas, you remember?
Take the kilograms and times it by 2.2.
Right. So if you're gonna take your body weight for this one, it's gonna divide it by 2.2. Right. So on like 200 pounds, it's like 90 something kilos. Okay. A little bit of math, a little bit annoying, but that's how like all the studies are done, unfortunately. So we gotta learn how to do kilos and milligrams and all that fun stuff as we move forward. Okay. Now there's a pretty consistent range between 2 to 7 grams per day, okay? And again, we're gonna kind of start you out at like 5, then we're gonna adjust depending on how everything's going, okay? Because some people are gonna handle carbohydrates a little bit better than others. Some people are gonna handle like the different types of carbs a little bit better than others, okay? For some reason, and I'm not quite sure why, it's stuff I'm still searching, but females may need a little bit more carbohydrates, and they may actually work more effectively off of a little bit higher carbs. I've seen that pretty consistently, especially again for like they've done a bunch of studies on fighters and all that stuff. When it comes to their nutrition, they tend to do a little bit better on carbohydrates or on more carbohydrates. So for a pre-workout meal, we're recommending about 30 to 40 grams of carbs per workout, okay? So that's about 120 calories to 160 calories for a pre-workout meal, if that workout meal is going to start or fall within like 30 to 40 minutes before your workout, okay? The closer that pre-workout meal is to the actual workout, or again, when I say workout too, I mean training, practice, or game, the more important it's going to be for us to focus on those simple carbohydrates so they can get into our system faster, because now we're running into that time window period. We don't have long enough to actually start to digest those complex carbohydrates and start using those for energy, okay? If you're falling in an hour and a half to 2 hour range, which that might be for lunch for you guys, like lunch throughout the day or something like that before you work out, if you come to us right after school, then the complex carbohydrates will work totally fine, and it's maybe a little bit less important for you guys to focus on that. I need to get another gram, whole thing of carbs in right before I work out, because you'll kind of be topped off on your energy there already, okay? It'll be still important to maybe get some protein and stuff in, so we're hitting our protein requirements throughout the day, but you'll probably be okay when it comes to carb-wise, unless you find that you want to do it anyways and that you feel better on it anyways, right? Whenever we start talking about these recommendations, these are the places that will start, but we're going to have to adjust depending on how everybody's doing, because everybody's going to be a little bit different, okay? For post-workout, we're saying about 0.5 gram to 1 gram of carbs post-workout. That's, again, per kilogram of body weight. Sorry about that. Trying to get that right with your post-workout meals. That's the same thing. You're trying to get that with your protein, that 30 minutes to that hour window period afterwards. Again, this is more important if you didn't have a chance to do a pre-workout meal, maybe you didn't eat anything throughout the workout or in between games, And we have to play again the next day, or we have to work out hard the next day. That window is going to start to take on more importance. Okay? Cool. Any questions so far on that stuff? On carbs, fats in general, if anything popped up? Cool. So, that kind of rolls right into our next, that's kind of going to wrap up like the macronutrient section of this talk. We're going to pair that, or roll right into our hydration part. Again, as I kind of mentioned before, we're putting this right after the carb section because carbs are also important for hydration. We'll go over that in a little bit, okay? Just like our energy levels can start to influence how we're feeling throughout a workout and all that stuff, hydration can do the exact same thing. The problem being is that I think a lot of people get really confused when they actually start to think about what being hydrated actually means. Like, that's a term that you'll hear all the time. You need to be hydrated, you need to be hydrated. But I don't know if anybody has a real idea of what that means. So we'll go over it a little bit. So, what does being hydrated mean? It means we want a liquid balance.
Is it like 0.7 liters per body weight?
So that's a recommendation that we'll kind of get to in a little bit. And I love where your head is, and that's part of the confusion. I'm talking about what that actually means, like in your body, whether your body is in a state of being hydrated or not. So yeah, you're all on the right lines. A little bit different question, but I'll explain that in this right now, okay? So, has anybody heard that we're like, on average, like 60 to 70% water? Like, right? Cool. So, again, there's kind of a range between that. Like some people are gonna be closer to 50%, all the way up to 70%. So what that means is that we need to like retain enough water, and we need to have a balance of liquid between our blood, the space in between our cells, and actually inside the cell. And by the cell, I mean like muscle cell itself, okay? So primarily, we hold water and fluid in our muscle cell. Then in those outside two areas, again, in between the cell and in your bloodstream, that's where the rest of your body water actually is, okay? The importance being a balance, right? It's not super important that you guys remember exactly where it is, like the percentage of between the two spaces. What's important is that, for you to remember for this talk, is that we need a balance of water inside and outside of our cells, okay? So, kind of along those lines, can anybody think that can you be overhydrated? Any guesses to that? Yes?
Yeah.
Cool, you're correct. Okay, again, we'll go over that a little bit, because if I have too much water outside the cell, again, some things are gonna happen. I'll get to that in a little bit. So, why is it important to actually stay hydrated? Losing on average 2% of your body weight. So say you start out, again, from about 200, like a little bit more than 200 pounds, so we'll make 200 pounds easy. If I lose, 4 pounds of water, okay, then my endurance performance is going to start to decrease, okay? So as I start to become dehydrated, my heart actually has to start working harder, so my heart rate's gonna be up because I start to sweat and that blood or water actually comes out of the bloodstream. Okay, so now my heart's gonna have to work harder. My endurance is gonna start to tank as I get more and more dehydrated, okay? So, like a 4% total of your body weight loss can equal like a 20 to 30% reduction in your endurance performance, okay? So that can lead to you being way more tired at the end of a game, at the end of a tournament. They've also done some studies, and they've done this in basketball players. You have a gradual reduction of accuracy in a skill. So they were measuring how hydrated these basketball players were, and as they progressed from 1% of their body weight loss to 2% of their body weight loss, 3 and 4%, their shot accuracy actually went down. So for baseball, softball, like the endurance aspect is a little bit less important because you're not going to be, when it's hot, it's super important, but if you're not necessarily sweating super much, the sport itself is not necessarily going to be something that dehydrates you very quickly, okay? However, it's super important to be accurate. It's super important to have your skill on par. So even as you start to dehydrate through a game or a tournament, it's going to be harder for you to hit the baseball, softball. It's going to be harder for you to throw the ball where you want to, because that's that skill accuracy that starts to decrease as you get more and more dehydrated.
Yeah, I think that with our athletes playing travel ball, this probably happens to you on every single tournament without you knowing it. So understanding that is a real easy way to help you enhance your skill during a really long tournament where you're going to be playing multiple games.
I mean, that could be the difference between winning a tournament by the end of the weekend, not, or, you know, playing great at least playing really well at the end of a tournament and having a couple of coaches see you, or not, right? Because at that point, especially if it's like a Saturday, Sunday tournament, it's just like survival. It's survival of the hydrated at that point, right? So, along those lines, the increase of RPE, which stands for rate of perceived exertion of exercise, increases when you're dehydrated. So the same effort is going to it's basically the same workout, the same practice, feels way tougher. You feel like you're working way harder than you are. Because of that, you're gonna kind of back off a little bit. You're gonna start to shut down a little bit quicker, okay, when you're dehydrated. Okay? And then as general, water is super important for energy production, super important for your joint lubrication, and it's super important for temperature regulation. We're sweating all the time, so we can actually cool our body down, because if we get overheated, not only can that be really detrimental to performance, but it can be really detrimental to our health too. People can go to the hospital for being overheated, heat stroke, all that stuff, okay? Especially when we're playing in the summer there, okay? So, when we break down being hydrated, there's going to be 3 steps to this, okay? There's going to be starting again, practice, workout, game, tournament, is what's called a euhydrated state, which is basically another word for it being optimally hydrated. That's where you want to be. Preventing dehydration throughout the workout, and then recovering the fluids that we lost after we're done with that workout or tournament. Okay, and we're going to get into all those sections right now. Before we go, any questions about water, hydration before we can move it on? Oh, cool. So, starting right off with that first bullet point, starting euhydrated, okay? First off, how do you even know if you're in an optimal state, whether you're doing a good job with your hydration or not? One of the easiest ways to remember is this was like done, I can't remember the doctor's name, but like through the Gatorade Sports Performance Institute, I think that's the acronym for it. This was an acronym that they came up with, it's WUT, W-U-T, okay? So there's gonna be 3 parts to determining whether you are hydrated or not, okay? The W stands for weight, the U stands for urine, and then the T stands for thirst, okay? So this is supposed to be done first thing in the morning, and then it's kind of a measurement of how you did for the past 24 hours, so how you kind of did for the previous day when it comes to hydrating, okay? So your weight, we started this talking about how much of a percentage of your body weight that you are losing, okay? If you're more than when you wake up in the morning, based off close to your average weight, if you're more than 1 to 2% lower than what you should be or than what you are on average, that means that's kind of like a check mark, okay, I might be a little bit dehydrated, okay? Along those lines, first thing, you go to the bathroom first thing in the morning, you look in the bowl, I'm sure a lot of people have seen this or if they've heard this, check the color of your pee, okay? If it's clear, that means you're overhydrated, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a second, right? It's supposed to be kind of a light tinged yellow, and to also keep in mind that the bowl dilutes the color of it too. If you're going to the bathroom in a bunch of water, it's going to dilute the concentration of that. So if it's already clear and then it looks clearer in the bowl, that means we're overhydrated. If it's a little bit yellow, a little bit like light orange, that means we're probably in an okay spot, okay? But then if you start getting to really orange, if you're root beer color, you should go to the hospital. If you're in that orange spot, you probably should be doing a dark orange a little bit better with your hydration from the day before, okay? So if you check that, that's kind of another check in the box. Then if you wake up thirsty, could be one of 2 things. Yes, that could be a check for your hydration status. It can also be the fact that you're just breathing through your mouth the whole night like this. Okay? If that happens, okay, you kind of need to either figure out whether you're breathing through your mouth while you're asleep or if you're actually thirsty. Okay? If you have 2 out of these 3, then it's like a high likelihood that you're dehydrated. If you're 3 out of the 3, then it's like an almost definite that you're dehydrated. If it's 1 out of 3, it's a little bit less of a chance that you're dehydrated. It might be something else there. Okay, like if your weight's off in the morning, maybe you just didn't eat enough for the day before, or something like that. Okay? Does that acronym make sense? Because that is going to be the easiest way for you guys to, like, that's like one of the biggest takeaways when it comes to your hydration here. Because it's pretty easy, it's easy to remember, and it's not like you need to necessarily do anything special to like assess that. Like there are test kits and stuff that you can like, you know, key into, and it'll tell whether or not you're hydrated. None of that is necessary if you start to take this check on a consistent daily basis, so you can get a good record on how you're doing. Cool? So, with that being said, to start you hydrated, we're gonna go 0.5 ounces of water per day per pound of body weight. Okay? Again, for a really easy example, 200 pounds, that means 100 ounces of water throughout the day. If you're 100 pounds, that means 50 ounces of water throughout the day. Okay? However, again, that is going to adjust off of activity level and how hot it is, right? That's kind of just a baseline. Okay? Along that is that there's a couple different places that you actually get your total water throughout the day. So, on average, like 50% of your total water that you get throughout the day is actually from the water that you drink. About 20% is from other drinks, you know, your energy drinks, your coffees, your teas, whatever else you're drinking, because that stuff all has water in it too. And then that other 30% comes from the foods that you're eating, okay? So whole unprocessed food can actually help contribute to your hydration status also. So whole unprocessed food being fruits, vegetables, meat, eggs, right? So a couple examples there is like a cucumber is actually 96.7% water. Watermelon is about 91.5% water. Strawberry is 91% water, right? So fruits and vegetables, especially the fruits, are more water than they are anything else, okay? A couple other fun parts about that too is eggs. Whole eggs are about 75% water, and then a steak is about 65% water, okay? So if you think about it, like, you know, kind of weird to think about it, we're a steak. So if like you were on average about 60-70% water, that's the same thing as like eating another animal's muscle tissue. The more you cook it, the little bit, you know, it'll start to get a little bit more towards that like 60-70% total water. So that kind of medium rare is like that 65% water, and then go from there, okay? So whole unprocessed foods are gonna be a big part of you staying hydrated, okay? Because of that, like, so I went over, when you are eating a lot of processed foods, a lot of those foods have a lot of water baked out of them. Like, I think I've seen I've looked this up, and like some biscuits that you would see in like biscuits and gravy in the South are like 3% water. So that's why they kind of feel like you just ate a brick after you ate those. And then they have a lot of salt for their preservation status. As we're gonna go over a little bit too, salt is not inherently a bad thing. It's super important for us to stay hydrated. It's super important for our muscles to contract. It's super important for our nervous system to function. The problem is that if I eat a diet that has a very high concentration of salt, I either need to drink a lot more water to make up for that, or then I have too much salt. Okay? Is everybody following that so far? Any questions about that? Okay.
And I want to note too, like with the 0.5 ounces of water per day per pound of body weight, that is how much water you're drinking. We're not taking into account your food. So if you go for long periods of time without eating, but you're still hitting your water intake, you could still be dehydrated because you're not eating enough too.
Just another bullet point on salt is that, so again, on average, like 10% of the salt that we get is actually from the food. 15% is roughly what people actually add to their food, and about 75% on average is actually coming from the processing of our foods. So again, kind of just to illustrate that concentration point, if you're going, if I have to stop at McDonald's after practice or something, that's way, then I might need to be worried about my salt intake. If I'm more if I have, my food all prepared, I'm just making eggs in the morning, you're not really going to be able to add too much salt to it, because then you're not going to be able to eat it. If you add too much salt to your scrambled eggs in the morning, you're physically not going to be able to get it down. It's going to be disgusting. So add to taste and you're okay. Awesome. So preventing, that's kind of starting off the workout in a good spot. That's starting off your tournament in a good spot, okay? Now this is preventing dehydration either throughout that workout or throughout a practice, throughout that tournament, okay? So sweat rates can be about like 1 to 5 pounds per hour, but that can be easily much more. A lot of that is going to be based off of genetics, just who you are, how big you are. Bigger people tend to sweat a little bit more, the environment that you're in, so that's kind of an average there, okay? For some numbers here to remember, because as we keep going down, how much water we should be drinking and stuff, there's going to be some conversions, should all be here, so Max, try to stay with me. Okay. 1 liter is about 2.2 pounds of water, okay? And then 16 ounces is about 1 pound of water, okay? So whether you have a water bottle, it's measured in liters, right? Like a Nalgene bottle or something, or you get just a couple plastic water bottles that are measured in ounces, that's kind of your conversions there, okay? So, even though we went over thirst in the what, okay? Thirst is still a poor indicator of hydration status during the exercise. It's too slow, okay? It's too slow of an indicator, okay? You might start to be going down that, you're starting to sweat out more than the percentage of your body weight than we should be if we want to stay up at high performance before we actually start to get thirsty, okay? It's great first thing in the morning. It's good afterwards. During the workout, it's too slow, okay? And if you're just sitting around throughout the day, then that works great too, okay? So, kind of taken from one of the doctors who I've gotten a lot of this information from. His name's Dr. Andy Galpin. It's called the Galpin equation. For every 15 minutes, you're going to take your body weight and divide it by 30. And that's roughly how many ounces you should be trying to drink throughout that 15 minutes, okay? Again, that's going to be easier or tougher depending on what you're doing. Maybe if you're out for a long run and you can carry a water bottle with you, that might be pretty good. If you're in the middle of a lacrosse practice, that might be taking taking enough breaks, that might be okay, right? But if you're in the middle of a soccer game, you might not be able to do that, right? Because you're not actually going to have a break in that game to actually get some water down, okay? So because of that, if you're in a situation where, okay, I know I'm not going to be able to actually get that amount of water down every 15 minutes, it's better to go into that situation a little bit overhydrated, because you'll kind of sweat it out and then you'll be kind of where you want to be. Okay, that makes sense? So if you can, body weight divided by 30 every 15 minutes in ounces of water, okay? Just to keep up that performance, to make sure you're not losing too much of your body weight, okay? And like I said, it's difficult to kind of get that during high intensity exercise, because you can't actually get that water out of your stomach, okay? Like I was saying, we need water in our bloodstream, we need water in between the cells, we need water in the muscle cell to actually be hydrated. So if it's sitting in my stomach, that's not doing me any good, okay? So anything more than that, and you're probably not gonna be able to actually get it out of your stomach into the places that you want. Now, because of this too, funny enough, your stomach can actually be trained. So your stomach can actually learn to catch up. So if you say you need 5 or 6 ounces of water every 15 minutes, but you can only handle 3 or 4. Well, don't worry about it. Stick with that 3 or 4 ounces. Try it for a little bit. Over time, your stomach will actually be able to handle more and more. It's the same thing when it comes to all of these protein recommendations, carbs, fat recommendations, if you guys just went and did everything that we told you right, like tomorrow, you'd honestly probably feel pretty crappy because you haven't given your body a chance to kind of catch up to the amount. Like if you go from 30 grams of protein a day and all of a sudden you start taking 100 grams of protein a day, your body's gonna go, what the heck? And it doesn't have like the enzymes and all that stuff ready for you. So we're gonna wanna do a slow build up to this stuff, okay? So any questions about preventing dehydration in the workout right now? The equation is like the big thing to know about that. Try to get those ounces down when you can, okay?
After this, if you, what I would do is just go on your phone and calculate that and have that down. Because that would be really, really helpful during your workouts and during your practices.
So now, recovery, okay? To know this and to do, again, get this really scientific, you would actually weigh yourself before a practice or a workout, and then you would weigh yourself afterwards, okay? If you don't want to do that, if you can't do that, that's okay. The what acronym is going to work pretty well for this again also, okay? But our recommendations is going to kind of be based off of that, okay? It doesn't have to, again, for total accuracy, it would be right before. For practicality, if you did it, okay, I'm gonna stop in the locker room quick after school, and then you drove here and it was like, you can keep it the same, right? And then you weighed yourself when you got home, that's totally fine, right? That difference is gonna be how much fluid you lost throughout that workout, okay? So, you're trying to drink back 125% to 150% of what you actually lose in that workout, okay? So my example here, say pre-event I'm 200 pounds, post-event I'm 195, 5 pounds lost during that activity, so I need to drink 6.25 to 7.5 pounds of water. This is where those conversions came, that's either 100 to 120 ounces of water, or 2.8 to 3.4, 3.5 liters of water, okay? Super important to kind of get in the habit of knowing how much you're drinking to start to get this, right? Because if I'm not drinking enough, it all kind of leads right into each other. The recovery part, if I'm not recovering because I didn't drink enough after my workout, that means when I wake up the next morning, I'm not gonna start hydrated, okay? Which means that if I get into the workout there, even if I'm doing that, like, however many ounces I should be able to drink, I'm already starting behind the 8 ball, right? So that means it's gonna be tougher and tougher to catch up. That's why kind of having an indication of how you're doing after a workout is important, okay? It's 125 to 150% because you're gonna go to the bathroom and get rid of some of that liquid, right? So that is kind of what people have found that, okay, this is what we need to actually drink to make sure that the amount of fluid I retain is the equivalent to what I lost, okay? Cool, any part of that? Remember, 3 parts, starting off good, staying hydrated through, and then recovering after, okay? So, the problem with that being is that it can't just be water. The next part we're gonna go into is what to actually drink, okay? So, you don't just sweat out water, you sweat out sweat, okay? So that means, not actually, but you need to drink back sweat, okay? Don't go licking your friend, that'd be really gross, okay? But what that means is that you have water, and then you have sodium, chloride, potassium, magnesium, little calcium, okay? These are your electrolytes, okay? You sweat out water and electrolytes, that means we want to replenish both water and electrolytes, okay? So, on average, in about 1 liter of sweat, the important number that we're going to start with is your sodium, okay? Because that's the highest percentage or the highest amount of electrolytes that I'm going to sweat out, okay? For people, it can be either between like 500 milligrams, or that's half a gram, to 2 grams of 2 grams of sodium per 1 liter of sweat. Again, that's going to be varied depending on who you are, depending on your hydration status going into an event, and depending on your diet. If you have more salty foods, you obviously sweat out a little bit more too, okay? So, an easy way to tell is that if you have ever, again, worked out and you sweat a lot, if you looked at your clothes and you kind of have that white ring, maybe around your shirt, around a baseball cap or something like that, you can assume that you're a pretty salty sweater, okay? So it's gonna be better for you to assume that you're maybe in that 1.5 to 2 grams per liter of sweating, okay? But a pretty safe assumption if you've never seen that, you can go and get like sweat test kits off Amazon that will actually tell you the like concentration of electrolytes if you wear it when you're sweating. That can be kind of cool. But to assume that you're kind of in a 1 to 1.5 grams of sweat, or grams of salt sweated per liter, okay? There's about a 4 to 1 ratio of salt to potassium. So if you sweat out a gram, let me see if we can do this math. If you sweat out a gram of sodium, you're about 250 milligrams of potassium, okay? Again, you can either get that through food. There's a bunch of electrolyte drinks that have potassium added to it, which is super important. So like avocados is super high in potassium, like we've heard bananas is super high in potassium, both good choices for that, okay? And then about a 0 to 100 milligrams of magnesium and calcium that you lose in your sweat too. Calcium is way less important to worry about like drinking back, because it's probably the easiest electrolyte to get in your diet if you're like still eating whole foods. Like if you're drinking milk, you have like spinach and stuff, those all have calcium in it. If you're having cheese, like that has calcium in it, it's probably a little bit easier to get out or get in, and it's a very, very low milligram, like you don't really sweat out that much calcium. The problem with magnesium is that you still don't sweat out that much, but a lot of people are starting off again behind the 8 ball. It's very, very, very common for people to be deficient in magnesium based off of our diet, okay? So we recommend supplementing magnesium anyways. There's some of the electrolyte drinks are actually putting magnesium in their electrolytes also. But I take magnesium supplements every night. Does also help with sleep, so that's great. Again, a lot of people are deficient in it anyways. It's super important for a bunch of things. It also tends to help people who are cramping a lot. If you find that you're somebody who consistently cramps, there's a couple things. You are either out of shape and you can't handle the workload, and that your body's just like, what the heck, I can't do this yet. Or magnesium also tends to help that, or some other electrolyte balance, okay? So on the sheet here, we recommend you take your body weight and times it by 3, so that's how many milligrams of magnesium you should take throughout the day. You need to break it up, do like 1 serving in the morning, 1 serving in the evening, that's fine. I take all of mine before I go to bed, and it works out great for me too, okay? Now, with this, in what we're drinking, we want to make sure that we add back some sugar. How I was mentioning in the carbohydrate section, when we absorb a simple sugar, it's going to go into through my digestive system very quickly. It's going to go into my muscles. When that happens, it's going to pull more water along with it, okay? So that's going to help replenish my muscle water very quickly, okay? The problem, it's very easy to get too much sugar. That's kind of what I was talking about with like the Gatorade. What you're going to do and what you want is a 5 to 9% concentration of sugar in your recovery drink, okay? I've done this calculation like with some Gatorades, and they could be like 10 to 12%. How you do this is you take the milliliters of the liquid, and you take the grams of sugar and you divide it by the milliliters of liquid, okay? Whatever you're drinking, okay? This is kind of important, and this might be one of the most important parts to this, because if it's too high of a concentration of sugar, it's going to sit in your stomach. What you do is you actually then will pull water into your stomach and into your intestines, and that's when people get the poops, okay? So if it's too high in sugar, you could start running into problems. So that's something to actually pay attention to. Like, don't try something like this day 1 of a super important tournament and then have to run like to the bathroom and not be able to play or something. Okay, try this and practice first. Okay. Problem being with some of the sports performance drinks too is that it's the wrong type of sugar. It's going to be high fructose corn syrup, and what we really want is glucose, because that's the type of sugar that's in my bloodstream. Okay, so if you see something that says high fructose corn syrup on it, that is not the right type of sugar. We want sucrose, which is a better combination, or glucose in there, or it might say dextrose. Again, if you guys have questions on this, we'll totally we write this down and go over this. Make sure it's the right type of sugar and it's not too much, okay? For an example of like a great post-workout drink, and again, this is something that I got from Dr. Galpin that he does with like a bunch of MMA fighters he works with, is like coconut water plus Himalayan salt plus honey, okay? Coconut water is one of the best things you can have for potassium, okay? It's very, very high in potassium, so you can get that. But it's not very high in sodium, so you would actually need to add salt to it, and then it doesn't have like a ton of sugar, it needs a little bit more sugar in it too. Just as an example, right? I use the liquid IV packets, and I've noticed a big difference in how I feel from my workout, feel day to day, whether I'm running to the bathroom all the time. If I put like a couple liquid IV packets in the water that I'm drinking, I really like those too because it has sodium, potassium, and sugar in it. There's some electrolyte drinks that are like, oh, we're like sugar-free and stuff. And for some purposes that might be great, maybe just like everyday living, but if we're trying to replenish as quick as we can, we want that sugar. So again, whether one's better or worse is gonna kind of be situationally dependent, okay? So that's kind of the last thing about hydration. So anything about like fats, carbs, hydration, anything there that popped up? Cool. We're just gonna go back over sleep,
Yeah.
so.
So it's the last section here. Everyone all overwhelmed with all the information we just threw at you? So this is also why we're recording this too, and we'll send this out to you as well. And I'm gonna timestamp a lot of these things so you can go back and you can listen to these recommendations that you think would be really helpful for you, whether it is, we're about to talk about sleep, whether it's the carbs, the fats, the proteins, the hydration aspect of it. We're all gonna have that timestamp so you can go back to it and look at it and start using these recommendations that we give you. With all that being said, I would say sleep is probably one of the most important out of all of them, and here's why. If your sleep is off, it doesn't matter, but your nutrition, if it's on point, will not be as effective. So you'll be missing out on a lot of the good nutrients or how your body's using these nutrients if your sleep is crap. Okay, so generally what we recommend for sleep is 7 to 9 hours every night, and that's consistent. So that's going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time each night, even on the weekends. So far too often we see a lot of our athletes hitting 4 to 6 hours every single night during the school week because they got homework, they got practice, they have training sessions. They're just too busy overall, so their sleep gets sacrificed, and they think that they can make up their sleep on the weekends. And then what they do is they'll sleep for 11 to 12 hours. Now, the problem is this. That's actually going to mess up your circadian rhythm. So you're not going to get as much deep and REM sleep by doing it that way. All right. So during the deep and REM sleep, we actually start to regulate our hormones. We produce a lot of growth hormone, which is really important when it comes to recovery. So if we're not getting into enough REM or deep sleep, because our inconsistent sleep patterns, then we're going to be missing out on those things. And when our hormones don't get regulated the way that we ideally would want them to, our nutrients and how we process our nutrients isn't quite going to be as effective as we want. All right, so that can actually start to make you insensitive to insulin too, which is going to affect how you recover and how you build muscle. All right, so consistent sleep, going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time. And I know that this is tough for a lot of our high school athletes, especially on the weekends when you do want to stay up late. But doing something as simple as that, again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but maybe one day out of the weekend where you are staying on point with, I'm going to go to bed at 10 like I always do, and I'm going to wake up at 6:30 or 7 like I always do. That's going to go a real long way with your overall recovery and your performance. If you're in a season, that should be non-negotiable. You going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time every single night. All right, so that's going to greatly influence how much deep and REM sleep you're going to be getting, And if you are very inconsistent with it, you will end up getting a lot more light sleep, which you're not going to get quite as much of the benefits of that REM and deep are going to give you. Okay, so other sleep tips that we do give athletes. I'm a really big fan of taking a very hot 15-minute shower right before bed. And what that's going to do, introducing heat into your body, is it's going to tell your core temperatures, your body's going to tell your core temp that we're heating up, we need to cool down. So the second that you step out of the shower, your body is actually actively trying to cool yourself down. And when you do fall asleep and you get into deep or REM sleep, it usually happens when your body temperature starts to decrease. So if you're taking that 15-minute really hot shower right before bed and you're going straight to bed, then your body's going to start that cooling down process, and it's essentially going to trick your body to start to relax and fall into deeper sleep. Like you might notice that after you do take a hot shower or even a bath, your muscles kind of feel a little more relaxed. You feel like you maybe have a little more like mobility, and just overall you feel relaxed. That's essentially what's happening. Your body's trying to cool itself down. So that's a great, I would say, hack to start using right before bed. 15 minutes. Make sure that go until you start to feel your body temp increase, and you start to feel hot, almost uncomfortable, and then that's when you just can get ready for bed.
Do you mean 15 minutes before bed, right? Not a 15-minute shower.
No, I mean a 15-minute shower. Or until you feel like your body temp is getting elevated. That's just a general recommendation. If you want it to be 10 minutes, give me 10 minutes. Just make sure that you feel like your body's getting hot. So 15 minutes, and then what Joe talked about taking magnesium. Magnesium glycinate is going to help quite a bit when it comes to helping you get and stay into deeper REM sleep. Most people are deficient in it, so supplementing with magnesium glycinate, not citrate, you'll poop. You'll feel like you have to go to the bathroom. It's going to help a lot with deep sleep. I'm not a fan of taking melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone. If you start taking that consistently, it's going to disrupt, and it's going to make it harder for you to naturally produce melatonin. And one thing that we started seeing with athletes who do take a lot of melatonin is they fall asleep, but they wake up in the middle of the night, and then they have a hard time going back to sleep. And that's because the melatonin wore off. And I've had multiple athletes who have been using melatonin quite frequently, and they've been getting really poor sleep, but we got them to actually stop taking it, and their sleep quality improved because their body started naturally producing that melatonin. So like chamomile tea, that's a really great one to just help you to start to relax and almost try to down-regulate yourself and get into what we call a parasympathetic state. We don't want to be in what we call a sympathetic state, which would be more something that you want to be in before you go work out or before you go play. But when you're more excited, where parasympathetic is more rest and digest. So we're trying to do things that are going to push us into that direction. Okay. Don't FaceTime your girlfriend or boyfriend. You guys, you're gonna stay up way too late. You're staring at a screen. Blue light is going to inhibit your ability to produce melatonin. So if you're just staring at your screen, for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour right before bed, that's going to greatly influence your ability to produce, not only produce melatonin, but also get into a more calm state. If you're on social media for hours on end, that's your dopamine is skyrocketing, and you just kind of keep scrolling before you know it, you've wasted about an hour to 2 hours where you could have been just resting in bed. So generally speaking, I really like having our athletes take their phone and just don't have it in your room. Put it in a different room, put it on a charger, and use a good old-fashioned alarm clock, and you will be surprised how much better sleep that you get. And you know what? We're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of laying in bed, looking at our phones. It's way too easy to do, but that will greatly influence your sleep. And by influencing your sleep, it's going to influence your next day, it's going to influence your recovery, and it's going to be a cascading effect of all these other things that we just talked about. You know, we gave you guys a lot of info on that, but that's where you get one bad night of sleep, and it might result in you actually feeling like crap, you know, 5 days from now, or a week from now. So by continually getting poor sleep and continuing having poor nutritional habits, you're kind of just kicking the can down the road over and over again. And then you hit that one day where you just feel absolutely exhausted because the recovery's down and you know your overall stress management is suffering. All right, so instead of having that phone in your room, you know, I'm gonna sound old here, but read a book. Yeah. Perform some mobility work and breathing exercises right before bed. Well, I can't tell you how many videos of just before bed warm-up mobility exercises that I have sent out to multiple people, and I just have as an access and a resource for all of our athletes. It's as simple as, you know, go over that warm-up and then put your phone away, perform some maybe like box breathing or some other breathing techniques, and then go to bed. Has anyone ever heard of box breathing? We'll have our guys say. Box breathing is essentially like you're gonna lay down, you're gonna close your eyes, and you're gonna breathe in for 3 to 5 seconds. You're gonna hold for 3 to 5 seconds. You'll exhale for 3 to 5 seconds, and then you'll hold for 3 to 5 seconds. And you're gonna do that on repeat for anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes. If you've never done this before and you do have a hard time falling asleep, try it. 5 to 10 minutes right before bed, lay on the floor, close your eyes, do box breathing for 5 to 10 minutes, and you're gonna feel like you go straight to bed afterwards. It does a great job of just putting you into that parasympathetic state, okay? So those are just some sleep tips that I have for you guys, and I can't tell you enough how important and how valuable good quality sleep is going to be for a high school athlete. All right, so all this being said, to finish this off and kind of like wrap this all up, I want to go over some of the guidelines that we went over, and I want you guys to really pay attention to this. A lot of it is body weight specific, so I might have you just take your phone out, make a calculation, and write it down so you have that ready to go, okay? But the first one here, and this goes in with like the protein recommendations that we had with the frequent meals. 3 meals by 3 and 5 by 9 every single day. That's going to help you stay fueled. That's going to keep the amino acids in your body so that you can repair your muscle and tissue. Now, when I say meals, I don't necessarily mean what you're eating for dinner. That size meal. All right, this can be small to medium-sized meals each time. Okay, but hitting that on a consistent basis is going to keep you fueled. It's going to help you stay hydrated. It's going to help you hit all these guidelines and these goals that we laid out for you guys. Okay, so going in about our protein, carbs, and fat recommendations for training days, 1 gram per pound of body weight. All right, so that's every day. If you weigh 100 pounds, it's 100 grams of protein every day. All right. Also on training days, I'm gonna have you guys actually take out your phone and I want you to calculate this. Okay. Carbs. Take your body weight, divide it by 2.2, which is also how many kilograms you weigh. All right. Now you're gonna multiply that by 4 to 5. Okay, we'll start with 4, and then you can do that for 5 as well. That's how many grams of carbs per day you should be having on days in which you're training. All right, that could be weight room, but also if you've got practice or you have any sort of activity that's intense. Okay, fat, body weight divided by 2.2. That's how many kilograms you weigh. and then you're gonna multiply that by 0.8 to 1. And that's how many grams of fat you should have per day, okay? All right, non-training days. We have 1 gram for protein, 1 gram per pound of body weight. That stays pretty consistent day after day. Try to hit that consistent protein intake, all right? Carbs, you're gonna take your body weight divided by 2.2, that's your kilograms, and you're gonna multiply that by 2.5 to 3.5. So the days in which you're not going to be quite as active, the carbohydrates are gonna be a little bit lower, right? If you got practice games, stuff along those lines, even if it's not you in the gym working out, training, but you are going to be very active, treat that like a training day for carbohydrate intake, okay? As for fats are actually going to be higher on the non-training days because we use more fat when we're not as active, all right? So that's body weight divided by 2.2, and you're going to multiply that by 1.5 to 2. Okay, so that's a real easy way to, just for a macronutrient standpoint, how much macronutrients you should be having on a daily basis, okay? After that, post-workout, I want you to shoot, you're gonna shoot for 25 grams to 50 grams of protein, depending on your size, with carbs being 0.5 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. And what we were talking about earlier, if you did have a meal beforehand, it doesn't have to be quite as much. So I would definitely go back to those protein slides and look at it more from a holistic view before, during, and after. Okay, so that time frame you're gonna try to hit at least that much. Okay, but a real simple way to do this would be just have your protein shake after your workout. You know, you can mix it with water if you need to, and then just have a banana and some strawberries. Okay, and you could be going off to your next lesson or practice or whatever, and you can still eat that, and it won't sit in your stomach quite as much, and you'll still be able to perform well without feeling like you just ate a big meal. Okay, so that's a good protein recommendation post workout. Guidelines continued. All right, hydration guidelines. We talked about this. Body weight times 0.5 in ounces of water every single day as your baseline. Okay, so we also went over, if you practiced, if you had games, if you sweat a lot, that does not include that baseline. All right, if you're losing weight from playing or practicing, you have to use that calculation to rehydrate yourself on top of that 0.5. That's why we do tend to, as a general recommendation, as a quick one really, kind of a lazy one though, we say 0.7, because at least you're going to overshoot a little bit. And if you don't calculate how much you're losing in practice or games, then at least I know you're probably going to get close. For better absorption, using salt and sodium to help you, especially if you do eat cleaner, if you don't eat a lot of processed foods, to help you absorb that water, you know, just putting a pinch of Himalayan sea salt in your water, or using the coconut and salt mix that we went over in the hydration slide. That's an awesome one after your workouts or after an intense training session, to make sure that you're keeping your sodium salt up there and you're able to stay hydrated. Okay. And then just finally, to finish this off, I'm just going to briefly go over the supplement recommendations that we do have for our high school athletes. Now again, a supplement is not going to replace a poor diet. A supplement is exactly what it sounds like. It's supplementing a good diet. It's an addition. All right, so if you don't eat well, if you don't have these good nutrition habits, taking creatine isn't going to be the magic bullet for you, okay? But these are just some general supplements that we do use, we do recommend, and these tend to be effective for high school athletes who do have, you know, their nutrition on point. All right, so that's whey protein. We talked about the brand, the Optimum Nutrition. Creatine monohydrate. It's a very safe and effective supplement. When we do use creatine, we usually don't recommend it until we have an athlete who has been training with us for a while consistently. Not that there's any sort of negative benefit if you did take it. It's just there is you will see a difference when you start taking creatine. I would rather get you stronger early on when it's a lot easier when you haven't been training for a while before we start to implement that supplement, because it won't be quite as effective after the first time you take it. All right, so I almost like the policy of you have to earn your right to take creatine. Okay, you have to be training for a while and you have to earn that it's almost like a step. I've been training for a year and a half. I'm 16 years old. Yeah, that could probably be a good time to take creatine. If you're 13 years old, never trained before, you don't need it. You know, it'd just be a waste of money. Vitamin D. You know, we live in Syracuse. We don't get a lot of sunlight. Vitamin D plays a very pivotal role with hormone production. So supplementing that, especially as we get into the months where we're not going to be seeing a lot of sunlight, that's a great supplement. It's going to help with sleep, help with recovery, and help with overall hormone production, and even just like general well-being too. Okay, I usually recommend about 5,000 IU's a day when we get into the winter months, but you're going to be a lot better off even if you just get your blood tested and see where you're at from a vitamin D standpoint. If you're on point, you don't need it. But it's usually a safe bet to recommend about 5,000. Magnesium, we went over that. We had an equation on how much magnesium you should be having each day. Most of you guys are not getting enough magnesium through your diet, so supplementing with that, it's going to be highly beneficial for you guys, especially in regards to sleep, but also even like cramping and even just overall muscle contraction too. We talked about adding the LMNT in the liquid IV. That's the salt and sodium to your drink. Usually, what was your recommendation for that? Post-workout?
Pre. So that's something I actually kind of forgot to mention. So that combination of the sodium, sugar, that's kind of what you're drinking during and post. Okay, so that's, again, that body weight divided by 30 every 15 minutes, that's still that combination, okay? It's not just water. Again, going back to, if you drink a lot of water really quickly, you guys ever, if I just chug a bunch of water and I feel the urge to go to the bathroom, that's because you're actually diluting the water that's outside the cell, so you're diluting your concentrations of sodium and all that stuff. So muscle contraction and all that important things are not going to work as effectively. So all the hydration numbers and stuff that we went over, that is kind of that's what you should be drinking. It's a combination of the electrolytes. Again, that's where something you might not need the sugar all the time, but in the workout and post-workout, that concentration of sugar is important, but the electrolytes are important to be drinking like the whole time.
And I think the LMNT does not have sugar in it, but liquid IV does.
Yes.
So that's something to consider. But we've both seen some pretty good results just by using that with just short-term performance, especially if you're somebody who tends to be a little more dehydrated. The next one is BCAAs. This is branched chain amino acids. This is similar of proteins. It's a great drink to have before, during, and after of your training sessions. The research does suggest if you do have enough protein in your system, you don't need it, but we have seen lots of benefits when our athletes do start to take some BCAAs, just as far as like energy, endurance. I personally notice with RPE too, just the rate of perceived exertion in the workouts, it just seems to be easier. You seem to recover faster from set to set and exercise to exercise. But you're also going to get an increased rate of protein synthesis when you are taking BCAA. So, you know, whether you're getting enough protein in or not, I think it's still a pretty good supplement to have before, during, and after your workouts. And it's not like you're taking it before. I'm taking it during and I'm taking it after. You're just sipping on it throughout. A great brand that we like to use is Extends. And I also have a video of supplements that we recommend, and I break down all the brands that we use too that I'll send out, right? And then lastly, a multivitamin. You know, it's really just, in my eyes, an insurance policy to make sure that if you're not getting the micronutrients that you need to be getting on a day-to-day basis through your food, just by supplementing a multivitamin will at least ensure that you're getting much closer. You know, if you do have a day where you might be lacking, at least you have that available to you. So just a daily multivitamin is a great way to almost just just in case I don't hit what I'm supposed to hit today, at least I have those micronutrients available to me. Okay. That's all for today. Does anyone have quite any questions? Yeah.
If you're a person who has like a lot of midday crashes and like, your energy tends to like go down towards the middle of the day, would you recommend like a short like nap, like 18 to like 25 minutes?
I'm not. If it helps you, yeah.
So it won't affect like your circadian rhythm.
If you consistently do a nap, I would say no. It's all individual dependent, though. You know, if you take a nap and you realize and you sleep okay, then I got nothing against it. I think naps are healthy. If you're really wondering, like how much, like what's the quality of sleep that you're getting, you can have this thing called like a Whoop strap, or even like a lot of like Apple watches or like Garmin's will actually track your sleep, and then that just kind of takes away the guesswork, and you can see, okay, how many hours of deeper REM sleep was I getting, how recovered am I, and it's just a great way to just take the guesswork, like almost like answer that question for yourself. If I'm taking a nap, is it good or bad for me?
Kind of piggybacking along that. So Rick kind of went over the different parts of sleep, right? Like you have deep sleep, you have REM sleep, you have that light sleep, all that fun stuff. If your sleep cycle is about 90 minutes, so that's how long it kind of takes you to run through all of those stages of sleep. You take a nap and it was maybe like 45 minutes, an hour, and you wake up in the middle of one of those deep sleep sections or the REM sleep sections. That's when you actually start to wake up, and you might feel a little bit more crappier. Or that's when it might start to actually affect your sleep. If you're taking, because there's some things that build up throughout the day. It's called adenosine. It's like it makes what's called sleep pressure. So that's kind of like the droopy eyes, like holy crud, I really need to go to bed feeling. Once you start to get into those deeper sections of sleep, you'll start to take that away, and you'll start to, you know, bite into that chunk that you start to build up throughout the day, okay? But if you're in those lighter stages of sleep still, for maybe like a 20-minute nap, you won't quite start to rid yourself of that sleep pressure that you might start to feel later on in the day, okay? So if you're taking like a nap really quick, and again, it's 20 minutes, and then you still have the ability to fall asleep at night at your normal time, you know you're doing great, right? It's absolutely no problem. You can still get a lot of mental focus benefits from that quick nap that, you know, go throughout your day. Another thing with that, and that's kind of along the lines of like the simple sugar and carbohydrates, one of the things that you might want to start looking into is what you're eating for breakfast in the morning, because protein, fats, complex carbohydrates are going to take longer to digest. That's one of the things that we're pointing out of more consistent energy throughout the day. If you find yourself really starting to dip consistently, and if you're eating Frosted Flakes in the morning, really high bump in sugar very quickly, I'm sure we've heard of insulin before, right? That means I least have a big increase in insulin. That shoots my blood sugar down way quick, right? We talked about how your blood sugar is important for how your brain feels, because it burns off of that blood sugar very effectively. So if I crash my blood sugar because I had a high insulin response, if I'm not doing anything, you're gonna feel like you just need to take a nap. So nap might be okay, and especially if it's not a long one, but make sure that you're like not eating anything that might be causing you to want to crash harder. Right.
Yeah, I think that the question you should be asking yourself would be why am I getting so tired? Any other questions? Cool. You know, after this too, like we are planning on rolling out a more formal nutrition coaching group as well for the people who do work with us, where we'd be meeting up on a weekly basis for 3 months, and it's essentially taking a lot of these things that we just went over and helping you implement this in your day-to-day life and taking it as a digestible, one section at a time, and improving your nutritional, sleep, hydration, and stress management habits, and making it more effective so that you're getting more out of the training and you're getting more out of your sport. And probably we're going to be focusing even more so on building lean muscle mass, helping you get stronger and bigger too. So if you got any questions with that too, I'm going to send out information on that. We're going to hang out for a little bit. Feel free, if you got like your own personal question, to come over and ask us, and we'd be more than